Okay. We are here this afternoon with Dr. Nici Richardson-McFarland. She is a grief therapist and the owner of Crown and Hope Counseling. We are so grateful that you're joining us today, Dr. McFarland, and we really would love to hear from you your journey and how you got to this space and advice that you can lend to our viewers. So let's
Oh,
just dive in.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
let's dive
good.
in. Why don't you wait? Let's start by you sharing a little bit about yourself. What inspired you to be a grief therapist?
Honestly, I think sometimes what we do chooses us. And I was inspired to be a grief therapist, not only by my own personal grief experience, but the fact that I was invited to walk with others through their grief experience as well. I have a background being a hospital chaplain. And so I got to be with people in the darkest days of their lives in deep crises. And they were humbly able to invite me into those sacred spaces of their heart. And it transformed me from the inside out. When you get that invitation, it changes you immeasurably. And so I love the fact that now I get to choose and to be open and invite those spaces in a clinical setting in counseling. So I'm really grateful for that. Personally, my mom had ALS and she was someone I was a caregiver of. And the way she walked through that journey with grace and the fact that I got to go through something terminal with her. And she eternally transitioned when I was 25 years old. So it has been over 10 years since I've lost her. And it was such an event for me that I got to see grief as an expression of love. And when you start to see grief as an expression of love, there's something about it that removes that discomfort that we so often have with grief. And it makes you feel absolutely embraced and enveloped in it, where you get to see the dichotomy of getting to love someone, yet miss them, getting to be relieved that they're no longer suffering, but yearning for that one extra conversation, that voice, and having that beautiful tension. So because of that, I just knew that this path was what chose me, and I'm just so grateful to be in it.
What a beautiful story, and what an amazing service that you've given to so many people. Can you share some practical tips for coping with grief during these difficult times?
Yeah, I think one of the best gifts we can give ourselves is permission to know that there is no right or wrong way to grieve, that we all have our own individual experiences. It's so easy for us to feel like there's something wrong with us because maybe we're still feeling like it just happened yesterday, that there's a part of us that is having such weariness and ache in our body that we have a hard times being present in situations and mentally being available. There is going to be waves of where we have more energy than others. And it's so important to give yourself the gift and the permission to know that where you are, how you're feeling, it's absolutely okay. And wherever we are, giving ourselves that compassionate gift to know that I need to hear myself, see myself, know myself, and more than anything, just love myself through it. Because the purpose of grief, more than anything, is to allow our heart to feel that thread of connection to the person, the pet, the absolute thing in our life that we've lost, that we've got that disconnection from. And we get the invitation and the permission to figure out, which is not always a smooth process, how we can live through it and holding it and moving forward. We never are supposed to get over our grief. So I think one of the best things to give people when it comes to coping is to be present, to be mindful of yourself, and to be kind. Because more than anything, if you allow yourself to meet yourself in it, you're going to be open to allowing yourself to determine who you need to be in it.
Right.
And there really is no right or wrong way to do it.
That's extremely helpful as well. As you have sort of been in this space for a while, are some of the common misperceptions or misconceptions that you have found that people have about grief?
I There's a few of them, and I think Dr. Alan Wolfeld does a really great job sort of dispelling those grief myths. So that is a great resource for people to look into. But I think one of the biggest ones that I run into is that we think that there's some set timeline that you like. If it's been 5 months, you should be over it by now. Or we have this culture expectation that almost that we need to expect these things to happen, keep going on with our life, and that it shouldn't impact us in certain ways.
Right.
And that is such a disservice to our hearts who are impacted more than anything. You mentally may understand certain things, but your heart is broken. And a part of you at times dies the day that someone dies as well. And so that's one of the biggest lies that people believe, is that there's some timeline, and in reality, I am still grieving my mom today. You're going to see me act very differently, and the only reason why I'm grieving her today is because I love her and she still means something to me.
Right.
I had a 15-year-old Chihuahua, and he crossed the Rainbow Bridge not too long ago. That puppy is still with me. Like that puppy still makes me want to go to Whataburger and get extra bacon, like just in honor of him. Like, he just the most delightful little man. And so, like, there are these ways that our grief, they're going to stay with us. And so there's not a timeline that ends, because the amazing thing is we grow around our grief. We are people of resilience, of grit. We have the capability of knowing that our pain of that day will not lessen. Time will not in any way heal us alone, but time will allow us to carry it differently, because we are capable of holding it differently and learning how to navigate it. And I think that is one of the greatest lies that we believe, is that timeline, which is not really fair or true. And you intimately know that when you get welcomed into the club that we don't want to be in, which is grief. You intimately know, I may not be okay in a year, and that's okay.
Right.
You deserve to have the permission to redefine what okay means to you. And I think Alan Wolfelt, which is why I love him, is he does such a great tangible job of sort of just concisely like naming the things that we think maybe no one else knows or believes or thinks like we do, just naming it and engaging it. And I love that he actively is engaged that belief that we need to dispel too, that timeline is just cruel and it's not right and fair.
Right. Dr. Richardson-McFarland, out of curiosity, can you just share with us, how can someone best support a grieving friend or family member? Sometimes we just don't know what to say or what to do. Like, what advice do you have for those individuals that really love and want to be supportive, but just don't know what to do?
No, that's a really good question. And I think the reason why I love this question more than anything is because sometimes our fears, they tongue tie us so much that we overlook the most important thing we can do, which is just to be present. One of the best things you can do with someone that you know is grieving, that you love, is to allow yourself to hold space for them, to surrender any expectations you have of them, and to let yourself just be with them.
Right.
In that being of with them, if depending on your relationship, you have to honor the connection you have. If you're the kind of person that they know they wouldn't mind you just doing their dishes for them, that's one of the nicest things you could do for them. If you're the kind of person who just is a hugger, just hugging is pretty amazing. But the biggest gift that sometimes we don't always know is the most precious gift, is saying the name of the person, the pet, or the thing that the person lost.
Right.
If you acknowledge, it is one of the biggest gifts known to man, because if you can just acknowledge it, what you did was you just validated and you saw someone in their suffering. You witnessed them. And that's one of the most amazing things that can be given, because you cannot fix what they're going through. You can't lessen the pain. You can't in any way make them or say something that will all of a sudden just make it lighter. But what you can do is you can acknowledge it, and you can volunteer to hold it with them for as long as you feel comfortable and able, because it's okay if you have limitations and you don't feel comfortable to do it. But if
Right.
you simply just let yourself look them in the eye, acknowledge them, see them in their pain, and honor who they are missing and who their heart is breaking for, you just gave them the most amazing gift that will help them for weeks to come.
Right. One of the things we've found too is that you have that sometimes you just have to be comfortable in silence. Right? It's okay if you're not saying anything and they're not saying anything, but sometimes your presence
Mhm.
is healing for the person who's grieving as well. And you can just sit there. They can cry. You can, as you said before, you can hold them, but you can just be.
Yeah, and in chaplaincy, they actually call it pastoral presence. And the reason why they
Mhm.
call it pastoral presence is because there's something about when you allow yourself to just be present, there's something that tends straight to the heart. And if you can allow yourself to just be present, however that
Mm.
means, whatever energy you may have in that moment, and you can allow yourself to be silent, what you're really allowing is for you to look into the eye of someone, into their soul, and for them to look in the eye of you in your soul.
Right.
If you can let yourself cry. If you can let yourself hold emotion with them and even just take a deep breath when you feel the tightness and let your body have that release, they're going to connect with you. And that is a great way to share that space in silence.
Right. It's amazing how we're wired as humans. Like we actually do have everything in our beings to help other people as well, to connect and to share. And it's, again, if you just sometimes just showing up, it's amazing how it starts to come out just naturally. You're holding the person, touching the person, etc.
And I think the one thing that's so important to keep in mind is you can never, if you even think that it's past some kind of statute that you don't want to say the person's name because you think it's going to cause them pain, if you don't want to acknowledge the fact that they still maybe have, the dog bowl on the ground, if you just pause and you look at it, you just put your eyes to it and you just say the name, there's never an extinguishing moment where that won't hold a gift for that person, because it takes a lot of courage for you to be able to even just remember and commit to keeping that memory sacred and true.
Right. That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Out of curiosity, are there any specific rituals or practices that can help individuals honor and remember their loved ones?
There are a few, and I think one of the ones that I love the most is so often we have unwritten words. We have unstated things that we want to say to the person that we are missing, or even to the part in our life that we're leaving. And there is so much part of us that just need to be expressed and voiced and articulated. And there is this tradition, and I may have this wrong. I think it's the Comanche tradition. It was a Native American tradition where they would gather around a campfire and you would write a letter to the person who passed away. You would say out loud the first few sentences. You would hold it. You would allow yourself to speak the rest towards the fire, and you would drop it in the fire and watch the embers actually rise and be delivered to that person. And there's something beautiful about opening up the channel of communication with the person or animal that we have lost, and allow ourselves to honor the connection that did not end in death.
Right.
The relationship does not die. And that is so important when it comes to rituals, is how can we engage that relationship? So I think one of the best rituals is giving yourself space to let yourself express and name anything that you need to, but then holding space for you to receive anything as well. These people inside and out, your animal so well. And if you hold that space, you will almost get to feel a tug on your heart of maybe what they wanted you to feel or think in that moment, what they wanted you to believe. And it's so important to let yourself do that. But I think something else that's really simple, that is a ritual with rituals, we tend to sometimes make them a little bit too complex. We think they have to be something that takes a lot of energy and time and organization and all these things. But something that is really simple, that is so good with a ritual, is simply doing something that allows you to feel the presence of that person or pet. If you went on walks with your pet, taking the same route, walking that route is a ritual that you can do to walk out in the love of steps with that pet. If you, with my mom, for instance, every time that we had a day where it was a little emotional, I was raised in a house of girls. My dad, he did his best, like with all the feels of all the girls. And mom would have these moments where me and my sister would be having a really bad day. She would cook popcorn. She'd put M&Ms in it. We'd go sit on the couch and we would get to talk it out and eat popcorn M&Ms. So when I'm having a day of feels and I just really need to just be in them, I go make popcorn and I put M&Ms in it. It's a ritual. It's a ritual that reminds me of my mom. It's a ritual that lets me, before I take a bite, to just smile and remember what she would do. Or she would, before she'd give it to you, she'd say, "Take a deep breath. Are you ready? Like you need some salt. You need some sweet. Let's get in there."
Oh, what a great,
those things are rituals. So rituals, as long as they are authentic and true to who you are grieving, what you are going through, and who you are now. They are the beautiful way to just form that connection, help you feel close, help you process. And the more simple, the more true to you they are, the more long lasting and better they will be.
Right.
Popcorn and M&Ms are so simple, but they will always make me smile. Like it will always be that moment where it's almost like a hug from my mom. And if I were to go on a walk, the walk that I would take my Chihuahua on, his name was Pudge, which is a fun one, but I would go on a walk with Pudge. And if I would take the walk, there was a place we would stop. And if I would let myself just stop there and just feel the wind, and I would almost see a picture of him in my mind, like just making me cry thinking about it, like letting yourself do that. That's the power of a ritual. The ritual is supposed to let you feel the tangible love that you are missing and that you're needing to feel.
I love that. I love that. We in this country don't do as good a job as other cultures in terms of honoring the people who've gone on, who've transitioned already. And I mean, there's some beautiful rituals in other cultures, beautiful, where people, have the day where one day where everybody honors everyone who's gone ahead. And some of the Latin cultures, there are just a host of things that other cultures do. And I like the fact that we as a society are beginning to look at these things in a different way. I feel like over the last few years, people have started talking about them more and more. Like, how do we honor loved ones that have gone on, and how do we help manage grief? How do we have these rituals? All of these things seem to be more present in conversation now than they've ever been. Have you found that as well?
Oh, and what I've loved is I'm starting to see public figures be vulnerable. I'm starting to see them acknowledge what they've been through. Stephen Colbert interviewed Andrew Garfield about the loss of his mom. It was the most beautiful exchange. That was so good. Regina King was interviewed about the loss of her son. She was so vulnerable. She allowed herself to voice things. The ways that people are not just grieving, but they're mourning. That is what I love. Our culture misses the invitation to mourn. We're actually decently pretty good at grief. We know that it's real. We know it's complex. We know that it's painful. But when it comes to mourning, we tend to feel so lost in it, and we feel a little bit timid, and we don't know how to navigate it.
Right.
Mourning is the external expression of grief. And we need to mourn so well. And I love getting to see these interviews that people are having, and they're letting themselves stumble through it. And that's the best interview of all, when you let yourself just get to pour from your heart.
Right. For our viewers, can you give an example, the difference between grief and mourning as well? Just like one tangible example?
Yeah, a really simple. So when you think about grief, it's all encompassing of your thoughts, your feelings, the changes in your life, the changes in your spirit, the ways that you're viewing things. That's all encompassing of grief. Grief holds complex emotions. Grief holds complex thoughts. Everything that you're processing, that's all a part of grief. Mourning. Mourning is the external expression of that. So if you were to simply think of grief being internal and mourning being external, it's a really easy way for you to separate, knowing that mourning is the ways that you're able to go to a memorial service. Mourning is the way where you get to visit a graveside. Mourning is the way where you maybe send flowers to someone, you write a card. Mourning is the way where maybe you voice to someone, I really miss. Right. I miss Pudge. I miss my mom. If I actually get to express it and invite someone to share that space with me, or even just hold that space for me to be in, that is mourning.
Perfect. I think that's helpful for people to make the distinction. We are here today. We are so grateful to be here today with Dr. Nici Richardson-McFarland. She is the grief therapist and owner of Crown of Hope Counseling. And just so the viewers who may be just tuning in, will you provide your URL for people to find you?
It's www.crownofhopecounseling.com. And I try to provide provide helpful resources, things like that. And if there's anything that someone really is needing more information on, they're having a hard time getting any kind of clarity, you can write me and I'll post something, and I'll make sure that we get you the right kind of connections, resources, and information out there, because we all just need to be connected, known in our grief.
Perfect. That's perfect. Well, let's dive back into the conversation. Just wanted to make sure if anyone's tuning in, they know exactly how blessed we are to have you today with us. What role does self-care play in this entire grieving process, and how can individuals who are going through such a difficult time prioritize their own well-being?
I love that question, and I'm going to answer in two parts because my first part's going to throw you off. So I think actually something that's so important is actually self-compassion. We don't talk about self-compassion enough. And self-compassion is a type of self-care. But self-care, we typically think of things that take time and money, right? So we think like as women, we think of mani-pedis.
Right.
As men, we think of working out. And they're wonderful self-cares. Do not get me wrong. But what actually can sometimes make a depth of difference that is so intense in us is self-compassion. And that is simply the act of being kind to yourself. And when we can be kind to ourselves, it creates even more space for self-care. It creates more ability to get to move and do things that maybe in our own weariness and our own heartache we're not able to do. We are so good at practicing kindness towards others, and we often are so bad at practicing kindness towards ourselves. If we build that muscle, it will make a world of a difference. Because when we think about self-care, you have to think about the 5 realms of self. You have to think about the mental, emotional, spiritual, relational. Wait, I missed one. Mental, emotional,
physical.
Thank you. Physical. That was the most basic one. Thank you so much. We have to think about those, because when you're needing to tend to yourself, you'll make the most powerful impact if you know which part of yourself you're the most weary in, you're having the most difficulty in. If you can find ways to tangibly tend to yourself in those 5 areas of self, you will feel super refreshed. And the thing about grief is it's non-discriminating. So grief hits all 5. It absolutely hits us in all those ways. So when we think about self-care, we have to be mindful of all the ways grief can cause us to be extra weary.
Right. One of the things, excuse me.
I wish I could give you water. I wish I could.
Sorry about that. One of the things that we often tell people that we're working with for BlueButterfly is to make sure it's very simple to drink, that they're drinking water.
Yes.
Like for the physical piece, it's something that people overlook. But the body is, when the body is grieving, it really needs water to help continue processing. You're crying, you're stressed, all these things, and water and staying hydrated really helps your organs during that period as well.
No, it does. And I think the other physical thing that we run past so quickly is your breath.
That too, yeah.
We breathe so shallow. Right. And if you just allow yourself to take deep breaths, you get your hydration, you take deep breaths. It's amazing how renewed your body may feel. It's going to still feel weary, but it's going to feel a little bit more of a baseline where you have ground.
Absolutely. Let's move on to these moments, kind of special life moments, for example. So how can someone navigate the challenges of grief on special life moment days like birthdays and holidays and anniversaries? What do you recommend people do on those days where things could be a little bit tougher than normal?
Oh, no, honestly, and that's something that I get to talk about often. Dr. Kenneth Doka actually created a really great resource that talks about ways to cope through the holidays. And he offers just really 3 simple things that are so important. You need to choose, you need to communicate, and you need to care. And one of the things that he really talks about, which I've experienced myself and I've witnessed in others, is you may have a beautiful plan and idea of what you want to do that day. But until you get to that day itself, you do not know if you have the energy, the strength, or the capability to do it. Right. So it's really important when you have anniversaries, when you have birthdays, when you have significant events, you make 2 plans. You make a plan on that morning when you wake up. If you have the energy to do it, this is what we're going to do. But if you don't, you have a backup plan where, let's be honest, you may just want to not be around people. You may not even want to talk about it. You
Right.
may want to just literally have a day where you listen to music, you go through the motions of things, you try not to think, and that's okay. Because the beautiful thing about those anniversaries and those dates is we need to know that they're not reliant only on that day.
Right.
There's a spirit of the day, and we have to allow ourselves to embrace that,
Right.
because if you don't have the strength that day, believe you will the next day, believe you will that week, because you will get to do the very thing that you want to do for their legacy, for honoring them, and for loving them. You will absolutely get to do it. But if they were alive, they would absolutely look at you and they would want you not to force yourself, overextend yourself, do something that does not have to happen on that one very day. And if we oftentimes give ourselves that permission, you're going to be able to do it that day. But if we don't give ourselves that permission, it's going to not feel great when we try to force ourselves.
Right.
And when it comes to those memorials, if we allow ourselves to openly communicate with the people that we want to do that with, like, this is what I ideally would like. For instance, some people want to do beautiful things like lighting candle lanterns and letting them release. I know, of course, good with the environment. Like, some people want to light candles. Some people want to go to have a dinner. Some people want to go to a lake and have just a little moment of silence together. All those things are beautiful. And the beautiful thing is sometimes you can still have those moments shared, or you can have those moments all happening simultaneously at the same time individually.
Right.
So having a little bit of flexibility where you allow yourself to meet yourself where you are that day, allow yourself to do what you may honor, but then having the scope of not having it have to be just that day, it can be such a freeing gift that lets you have just a beautiful invitation to make it exactly what you need and what you want, exactly the way that that love is meant to be shared.
Right.
And when we're able to communicate with people ahead of time, especially your intimate family members, like, say, a wife passed away, so a dad and their children are trying to think about what to do on that day, having just that open communication with them leading up. Hey, I want you to have the space and room to make this day exactly what you need. If you want to engage mom, this is what I'm thinking we could do to honor her. But I'm going to ask you that morning if you feel up to it, if you don't. If you
Right.
don't feel up to it, this is what I want you to do. I want you to get to do all these things, not think about it. Don't feel pressure. If we can have that kind of open communication beforehand, you absolutely suspend the pressure element that we often feel for memorials that can overcomplicate all of the tough feels that we're experiencing on those days.
Right. That's fantastic advice. Thank you. It's actually all tied up with self-care too, just giving
Oh,
yourself
yeah.
permission to kind of to grieve and celebrate when you're ready.
Hmm.
Um, all right, let's dive into counseling a little bit. Can you discuss the importance of seeking professional help or counseling during this process?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's beauty in community. There's beauty in witnessing and allowing yourself to just honor your own natural process in grieving and really your whole journey. And that is something that you don't necessarily need counseling for.
Mhm.
Where counseling can be the most helpful is when you find yourself feeling stuck, when you find yourself feeling absolutely in quicksand constantly, not having the energy to move, feeling isolated, not feeling connected, or feeling like you're the only one grieving, you're questioning yourself all along the way. When you're wrestling with these kinds of lines of thoughts, when you feel so disconnected from everything around you and you think everything's moving forward and you are not, that is the place where grief counseling can be the best gift for you. And there is no prescription in grief counseling, if I can just say that,
Right.
because my job is not to resolve your grief.
Mm.
My job is to go on a journey with you, to sojourn with you, to witness you, and to help you reconcile.
Mm.
When we reconcile, we don't absolutely almost surgically remove these pieces out of us. When we reconcile, we learn why these pieces maybe have stayed the way that they have so long. We honor that. We validate it, and then we give ourselves tools and wrestle with how we can learn to live as our best selves, as whole as we can be, and honoring our pain along the way.
That's absolutely beautiful. Can you share a little bit more about Crown of Hope Counseling and sort of what types of things, what types of services you offer, and what engaging you with you might look like?
Oh, for sure. So this has been something that started so simple and has completely gone many different directions. So when I started Crown of Hope Counseling, it was when I was starting to work less in the hospital setting. It really absolutely hurt me to see how many people would walk out of the hospital and they would walk out with these empty hands and they had no idea what to do after that. They were looking for support. They were looking for resources. And sometimes the only greatest connection that you had with someone of support is the person that you lose. And oftentimes that is your pet. That is your soul companion. And that is the most confusing time to know what to do with all of that. And so I witnessed so many people walk out of those hospitals with empty hands that I opened Crown of Hope to be a place where you can go straight from that brokenhearted place and find someone who's willing to be with you as you navigate it. I started it just specializing in grief. And I do have my PhD in it. So I do. It's not just from personal experience. It's actually from all the lovely books. But I started it with really focusing on just grief, natural grief. But there are over 17 types of grief. There is traumatic grief, disenfranchised grief, chronic grief, compound grief. There is acute grief. There's all kinds of grief. And so then the more I got well versed in all of those types of grief, I not only decided to offer support in each and every one of those, but I learned that those with chronic illness are anticipatory grieving. They are grieving before they even die. So I do help people through that. I help people coping through caregiving of people as they're preparing themselves to anticipate what is to come. I walk with people through that. And because of all of that, I'm well versed in burnout, in stress management, in spiritual distress.
Yes.
like in all of those things.
Right.
But what I've started to do the past few years, because COVID absolutely changed some things, is I don't just do grief counseling. I do a lot of consulting as well for people who are wanting to really help people and are stuck and knowing how to help those who grieve. I do consulting. I am starting to write tons of written resources, and I'm starting to provide some just little bit of modules and teaching to help people on the basic things that we get stuck on. Because my passion is to make it tangible, conceptual, and relatable. Grief is something that can unite us all. And if we can allow ourselves to hold it a little bit differently, not feel like it has to fit in some kind of box, and allow it to really just, more than anything, honor the legacy and steward the significance of who we are and the connection of what we've lost and what we're going through, we're going to make a beautiful difference and impact in this world with our heart. And so I'm trying my best to meet all the needs that I see before me, and I will do everything that God allows me to do.
Absolutely wonderful. I mean, I think when you're able to show up and do kind of like, you have the gift of being able to be present with people in these moments, to be able to truly share that with the world, because not everyone gets a chance to do what they're passionate about. No. And it seems like you have found the place. And for anyone that's just joining us, you go back, rewind, and watch even more of this interview, because it is clear that Dr. Nici Richardson-McFarland really has a calling for this. And for those of you that are interested in grief counseling, please reach out to her at Crown of Hope Counseling. As we sort of wrap things up, I'll just ask a couple of last questions. One, how can individuals create a lasting legacy for their loved one and finding meaning for their loss? Like, how can they, what do they need to do in order to make sure that, I mean, we talked about rituals before, but is there anything else they can do to make a lasting legacy?
And my biggest answer to that is to allow it to be organic. And because it's so important that you allow yourself to be true to the nature of your relationship and the character and the soul and the mind of the person or animal that you lost. And what I mean by that is their legacy will be your guide. If they are someone who valued education, if they're someone that absolutely was adamant on educating themselves, the best thing you could do to honor them is to get your education, to absolutely, for you to be the imprint, the lasting declaration of that heart and mind of that person. Or it may be something that is unique, such as a scholarship that you can make inside of their name. The crazy thing about it is when we're organic, as long as it is in tune, inherent to the spirit, the soul, the person that you lost, it's going to profoundly be a source of healing, connection, and more than anything, empowerment for you. It will allow you to make a difference. If we try to create something or force it almost because we think this is what is right, it's going to take a lot of energy out of you, and it's going to almost bust you out at the seams of trying to force it to make it happen. So the most precious gift I can give someone is to tell them to be organic, to let the relationship, the person inform you and inspire you for what would be the absolutely best way to honor their legacy, but all the while knowing that you yourself are a form of their legacy. There is no denying that your connection, the fact that you're thinking of them, the fact that you love them, you are an imprint of their legacy. And by you just living, by you just loving, by you just doing, you are honoring their legacy. And that makes a world of a difference.
I think that is how we're going to wrap this up. What a great reminder to people when they're going through a difficult time. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We have truly enjoyed this conversation, and I really believe that it will be helpful for many of our viewers as well.
Oh, I hope so. And truly, if I'm hoping that if anything, it spurs thoughts, it spurs questions. I hope it directs people to Blue Butterfly. I hope more than anything, it just opens people to finding the right connection, to see them, to support them, and to know that they're never meant to be alone with this heartache.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, if you're interested in bluebutterfly.com, we offer memorial pages for your loved ones, both human and pets. And you can go on and you have the opportunity to write your obituary, post photos, crowdsource photos, build GoFundMe's if you're planning for a service. You can, I'm trying to think all the things that we have. Set up charities for your loved one as well. But there's a host of things that you can do if you want to create a place where people can gather and honor your loved one together online. And then if you are interested in grief counseling, once again, please share with us how we can get in contact with you, Dr. Nici.
You can absolutely go to my website, crownofhopecounseling.com, or you can easily go to our Instagram at Crown of Hope Counseling. You can, and on those, you can easily see my email. You can write me directly. And if you want to find someone local that you can see, as I am in the state of Texas, I am passionate to connect you with someone that I believe would be a great fit. So even if I'm not the right fit, I will help you get the help that you're hoping.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right.